For information about investing in character-led companies, please visit www.rocinvestments.com and join the growing number of investors choosing to make character a priority when investing their money.
Hello, welcome to another podcast with me, your host, Dan Cooper, and this is the Return on Character podcast. I am the founder and CEO of Rock Investments, an investment strategy that allocates capital on the basis of the character of leadership in public markets. But we also like to talk to any and everyone who might care about character in the world as a subject for pursuit, development, and improvement. And tonight we got a pretty special individual who embodies that in a way that few do in the world. And Chitupa is her name. She is a coach, an executive coach that has taken many of the practices of return on character, Fred Keel's book, and implemented in her life's work. And I just want to welcome you and thank you for being here to talk about what you do and give us your thoughts. So welcome. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. Pleasure's mine. Thank you.
You know, you came recommended to me, not just as another guest that might care about character, but as somebody that truly has kind of picked up the mantle of the subject and worked to try to impact the world through its values. And so I'm really excited to talk to you. And this is the first time, by the way, we've ever had a chance to really talk,
Absolutely.
everyone. So this is going to be fun and fresh for me. But for starters, just why don't you give us an introduction of who and what you're doing today? And then I'll probably ask you a little bit about your past. You can go into that and how you came to today. But then ultimately, let's have a discussion about the things you care about most as it relates to what you pursue in the world today. So go ahead. Please tell me let's start with your story.
Right. So, so currently, as you said, I do executive development coaching, and I do this mostly with leadership teams. And most of the teams that I work with, I would say 90% are white male. I've done that for about the last 15 years in different geographies of the world. I really enjoy the work that I do. I find it impactful. I've seen changes. I've seen things that haven't worked, things that have worked. I enjoy it, especially I think because perhaps people don't see me coming. And so
why is that? Why is that? Why do you think people don't see you coming?
I think people don't see me coming because they don't. Well, first of all, I mean, yes, from my name, but people don't know where's this name from, so they kind of think, I don't know what they think, but, as I enter as a Black woman into many leadership spaces, it's sort of, I can see the look on other people's faces in terms of, okay, what have we got here? What's going to happen here? How could she possibly be in here, and what is she going to teach us? And I think that's exciting for me anyway, because, well, so far it's ended up with great collaboration, getting to know how leadership teams work and also changing them ultimately. So I would like to think that when I walk into all of these spaces, I walk in with excellence, I walk in with integrity, I walk in as a role model, so that these leadership teams can actually see, we can actually have Black people in leadership, and we can learn from each other. So that's why I love the work that I do.
Okay, well, you mentioned your name, and that's a neat entree into how'd you get your name, and what's the history behind your name. because it is so unique and beautiful. Tell us about that, and that might give us a little bit of window into how you got to doing what you're doing today.
Right, excellent. So my name originally comes from Zambia. My father is from Zambia, and my mother's from Trinidad and Tobago. And so so when they chose my name, I'm not sure that my mother really liked the name. She's like, okay, here we go. We need to go along with my husband's naming of his two daughters. So there are two of us, my sister and I. And I got the name Chitupa. And as I was growing up, I had a nickname, which was Chi-Chi. And I then went to boarding school in the UK, and I reverted back to my name Chitupa. I don't really know why, but everyone was very formal within the British system. And everyone pronounced my name beautifully. I then went to university at SMU in Dallas, Texas. And what I realized in class is that none of the professors would ask me any questions, even though my hand was, up in the air, whatever. And they would say, they'd be saying, oh, Sam, you tell us about this, or Jane, you tell us about this, or Dan, explain this. No one would ever say my name. So the one day I went up to a professor and I said, you never call on me. And he said, you know what, I just can't pronounce your name. I just can't do it. So I thought to myself, okay. So then I reverted back to Chi-Chi again. And as I went into corporate life, what I noticed was that my name diminished even more. So people start calling me Chi-Chi. And then they decided that was too long. They started calling me Chi. And then one day, I remember I was in a really important meeting, and the guy across from me said, hey, C, what do you think of that? And I said, I'm not a C. I'm really not a C. I cannot. My name has now diminished from Chitupa to a C. And so my father died about 10 years ago. And when he died, I really wanted to know where this name came from. And I discovered that the name actually it means identity. It used to be an identity card that indigenous Zambians used to walk around with to show. It was like let's call it like a national sort of internal passport that you needed to everywhere. And it was called a Chitupa. And when I realized that it was an identity document, I just kind of really embraced that. And I said, guys, everyone in the world now has to call me Chitupa. I'm reclaiming my name. It is really important. And it also really resonated with me in terms of, organizations need to find their identity. Leadership needs to find their identity. Individuals need to find their identity. Who are you in the world? You need to have confidence, and you need to know and find your identity. So there we go. It's Chitupa. It's originally from Zambia. And, anyone who tries to detract from that, the fullness of that name, I sort of bring them back to it. So that's where it comes from, Dan.
Well, and the other thing that has to happen is people have to respect the name and respect your name. And most of us don't have to demand that you respect our names. And pulling the professor aside and giving them a linguistics, lesson to be able to say, hey, this is how you do it. And to full knowledge, Chitupa did it for me too. And prior to this, to make sure that I got it right. Well, that's a fascinating story. It tees us up for what I'd like to do is to go a little deeper, because to me, your experience, you're incredibly unique in just that you've had experiences as African. Do you say African American or African British? What do you say African? What is your?
It is so it's really funny because when people ask me where do you come from, right? I say that's not a 2-minute question. That is an hour-long question. So How do I identify myself really is I say that I am Black British of African and Caribbean heritage. And behind that, actually, I've got grandparents who come from Scotland and Venezuela and Spain. So it's not a simple question. But however, so the socialization of the world is that, okay, this is what she looks like. She's a Black woman, end of story. But there's so much depth and heritage and ancestry with all that. So that's how I identify myself. And as you've asked me that question, I was hoping you'd ask me that question. I had written a poem not too long ago with a man by the name of Fred Keel, who has passed on now. And I wrote this poem, and I said, what do you think of this poem in terms of when he was asking me, who am I? So I'm going to just read a few snippets for you, if that's okay.
I would love it.
Okay,
yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so it starts off, I am from red, yellow, green, and even brown curries, all spicy, thick, and slowly cooked with loving hands and mediocre palates. I am from pure coconut milk and Indian Ocean waters and homegrown aloe vera being massaged into my locks by wrinkled and worn-out chocolate-hued hands. I am from my mother's Trinidadian impatient womb being birthed into my first breath. I am from the earthy smells of thick and uneven droplets of rain, conjured up from the rich, red African soil of my father's footsteps. I am from the joyful and excitable Champs-Élysées in Paris, the racist comments from Dallas, the beautiful walks along the Thames, the suspicious and peering looks in the jewelry shop. I am from every one of you who smiled at me or who did not, who said hello to me or who did not, who heard to me or who did not, who loved me or who did not. I am from the red, yellow, green, and even brown curries, all spicy, thick, and slowly cooked with loving hands and mediocre palates. So that's just a snippet from my poem. But
that was unbelievably beautiful.
Oh,
honestly, I mean, I have to sit here. I'm sitting here, and the grace that you're showing me, and consequently the rest of us, in taking the time to explain all this when most of us don't have to, right? I mean, you are affording me an insight into your world that you shouldn't, you have no obligation to, but you're helping us understand your experience because it's so unique. And in a weird way, it's a kind of injustice that we even have to ask you these questions, or we don't have to, or that you are posed these questions, because I think it makes us all richer for knowing it, and you being disproportionately rich in who you are as a consequence of your background. But I'm just grateful for the grace that you show us. And being able to give us context for your lived experience, because that's, no one asked me about my lived experience, and yours is fascinating. But to go deeper into that is, you also are just showing up like the rest of us, trying to make a difference in the world, and you're contributing with excellence. I want to hear more about that. Tell me about your life's passion and work, and And now that you so graciously given us context for what you done today.
I mean, I was very privileged to have been brought up with, with a set of parents who really thrived on excellence. And, as both my sister and I were growing up, the one thing that they always instilled with us was that it wasn't perfection, it was excellence. You do your best. You always do your best. And the other thing that they really instilled in me was integrity. They always said that you can't buy integrity. You can't. Your character is there with you, and people will see who you are by your character. So long before I even came to this type of work, and I think that's why it resonated with me, I was just like, it was something that was instilled in me that you don't even, I was brought up in a household where I was never told that I was a Black person. And I also was never told that I was a woman or a girl. So we never had conversations saying, oh, you're Black, so this means ABC. And I also can't remember a conversation where either one of my parents said, you're a girl, so it means ABC. What they had conversations about were about character, about who you were, about, you need to look at your value system. You need to, walk and in this world with a set of values that you can uphold wherever you go and that you have to defend. Now, that to me is character work there, even though it wasn't defined within that context. And so, I've been coaching now for over 15 years, as I said, with leadership in different geographies, and I've had clients all over the world. And it was during COVID where I reached out to KRW International, and they do a lot of character work, return on character. I'd seen the book, written by Fred Keel, and I reached out to Kelly, who is the CEO of KRW International, and I just sent a note on LinkedIn. And I've sent notes to lots of people, and they never reply, but she did, and she replied. And I honestly, as soon as she replied, we just started building a relationship. And it was during COVID. And I'm sure you have also experiences of people that you met through COVID that I just think that, there were things that happened in COVID and people that we all met that we never would have met had it not been for COVID. And it just so happened that when we connected, and she started talking about this, I just thought, wow, this is incredible work around return on character, and there's data to back it up. I knew from my own sort of life experiences that this works, but now there's data to back it up, and it's, there's this model around it, and it's done within leadership teams, and it's transformational. And so that's really how I started getting into the character work. And as a result of that, I then met Fred. And Fred and I, Fred Keel, who was the chairman of KRW International and had written the book on Return on Character, we met, and on the surface, it looked as if we were extremely different. Everything seemed to be very different with us, I was British, he was American. He was white, I'm Black. He was older, I'm younger. I love sort of being in cosmopolitan places. He's near Amish country. It was just polar opposites on the surface, right? However, as we started engaging with each other and doing work together, and we actually did work with leadership teams in Liberia as well, we just resonated on so many levels because we had this understanding that we both wanted to change the world to be just a better place for every single person and for everyone to be fully seen. And what really resonated with me was his sense of, one, humility, right? Because he came to me the one day and he said, you know what, Chitupa, I have been living in a white bubble. I have never considered myself to be racist. And you know what? I truly believed him. I mean, I believe Fred. I believe that context. But with that, I said, okay, do you want to learn more? Do you want to learn more about this subject matter, about, inclusion? And then, we had George Floyd and all that around it. And so the thing with Fred is that he was hungry. He was like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, what resources can I get a hold of? What networks can I plug in? He was really genuinely interested in inclusion. And so as we talked more, I said to Fred, the return on character model, what about if we use this in the inclusion space? Let us see how we can do that. And for me, it just all clicked into place, quite frankly, because I hadn't seen it be ice, and I still haven't. But if we were to take the 4 keystone habits there in terms of inclusion, it just made sense. So if we take, the one that I suppose jumps out is compassion, right? And compassion really is all about, as defined by KRW, and which I stand by, is that it's not just about looking at other people who are different from you or in different circumstances and saying, oh, I feel really bad about that. Oh, that must be so difficult, right? It's not that. It's going beyond that and putting yourself in their shoes and saying, this is not right. We've got to change this. Okay? And so how do we change this? Through, Fred and I then, we started writing a book. And what we learned is that we have to do this together. We have to do this together.
Two unlikely souls meeting in the middle to actually
Absolutely.
Produce something. Yeah.
Yes. And so what evolved out of that is that if two of us who's on the surface seemed to be so different could come together and do this type of work, then everyone can do it. You're not too late to be, you're not too old to be able to do this work. You're not. It's like there are no excuses. Okay, you say that there are no other non-white people in your county or in your village or wherever you are. That's not an excuse anymore. You can get on Zoom. You can meet people. Do you know what I mean? It's not an excuse
Totally.
anymore. So it's sort of, we really interrogated all the excuses and we said there's absolutely no excuse for exclusionary behavior. And so we started, with our life stories and our life experiences, and we looked at it through the eyes of exclusion. And what became very evident for us was that Fred had experienced a lot of exclusion in his life, even before I had, as a young boy. And every single person, if you think about it, Dan, you also have had experiences where you have felt excluded. It is something that we can all identify with, whether it was being bullied in school, whether it was you were at a family gathering and someone didn't want to talk to you. In all areas of life, if you look at your whole life and through the lens of exclusion, you will see that you have been excluded somewhere. And so that was the starting point to say, how does that feel? That feels awful, right? That feels dreadful. The difference is that, I'm excluded because of the way that I look, my skin color, and so are a lot of people in this world, right? That is not why you're excluded. So I can't go and change that. You may be excluded for something else. You can change that perhaps. So how do we come together through this model of these 4 character habits, keystone habits as it's known, in terms of return on character, which
Could you list them again for us?
Yes. So compassion, as I had talked about. Then the next one is responsibility, right? How do we both, so we're doing this together, right? How do I take responsibility in terms of me saying, okay, this is where I am on the journey, right? And then there's Dan as well. How do you take responsibility of where you are on this journey? There are a lot of Black people that I talk to who said, I'm not willing to teach, I'm not willing to show, I'm exhausted, etc. And I get that 100%, right? I really, really understand that, and I get that. However, my take is that in order for us to move forward, we both have to give. We both have to give, and we both have to look for a new way forward. So that's really, what responsibility is all about. Then there is integrity. Integrity really is about what I say I shall do, I will do. It's being in alignment. So when you see me here as Chitupa, and I say, especially within an organizational context, perhaps, guys, we're really going to put together an inclusion strategy that we're going to implement. And this organization within the next 2 years is going to look, feel, and be very different. And our results are going to be so much better as well. We're going to be serving new types of individuals, making new types of investments. When I say that, I'm not saying that because it sounds good for the press. I'm saying that because after I've said this, I'm then going to get all the necessary resources to ensure that that is done. I'm going to look at structures, processes, systems, equity. I'm going to look at the whole enchilada. So what I say I'm going to do, I'm going to do, right?
Integrity.
Integrity. Then there is forgiveness. Now, forgiveness, in the inclusion space, I think it's also really powerful. It's very powerful in terms of character as well. Because forgiveness is about recognizing and acknowledging that we've all made mistakes. It's not one group that's made a mistake. It's all of us that have made different types of mistakes along the way, right? And coming to the acknowledgement that we have made mistakes. Some of those mistakes are worse than others. However, what is the goal here? The goal here is to move forward and create another type of world, a different type of organization, a different family dynamic. So what we need to do, we need to forgive each other, and we need to now focus in on the way forward. The way forward is to forgive and to start building authentic relationships. I mean, if you think of just like a normal relationship that you're in, if you're always going to be going down to the lowest denominator of what each individual did, I mean, it's just not going to progress that relationship. Do you know what I mean? It's just, you're going to be stuck there all the time. And you're just not going to build trust, because as you move forward, the back of your head, you're like, oh gosh, they're going to come with that. They're going to, hit me over with that. So forgiveness is so powerful in terms of how can we now innovate? How can we move forward? What can we do in terms of building a new legacy together? And I would like to believe that I'm a legacy builder. That's where I find my passion in terms of, we can do something different, and each one of us can do it. So we need to give, and we need to do it together. And we just do not only be compassionate towards each other, but also, provide self-compassion. Because I think that in many spaces that I go into, that we have to have compassion for each other, but also self-compassion. And now let's get to work.
I mean, you so elegantly have taken the 4 character habits into a new universe of application, which is kind of, now that you play it out like this, it's so duh. I mean, it's like of course this is a form-fitted solution to an inclusion type of solving inclusion type problems and differences amongst us problems. It's pretty powerful. Let me maybe push you in the direction of, you mentioned the book as context for trying to explain possibly this application for use of the character habits. What was your hope for the book? Where does the book stand? And then what would be its use, in an ideal certain circumstance, once it's released and available to the world?
Right. Thanks. So the book really is a book. Are you there, Dan?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Sorry. Let's start again because you got frozen there. Yeah.
That's okay. If it freezes, it actually catches up for itself. So
don't worry
about
that. Right. So the book really is about lived experiences of both Fred Keel and myself, from the lens of through storytelling. So, and we wanted to exclusion. So it talks about, it's really storytelling, so that we could, and it would also, they could also sort of open up their eyes to, wow, I would have never identified with as many people as possible, and they could identify with our stories as well. And I thought that was a thing. I would have never, like a story as an example. I was telling one of my friends a story as to how whenever I go shopping, I always have to get the receipt at the end, right? And she said, why? I said, because if I'm stopped and I don't have a receipt, then the amount of interrogation that I have to go through would be so much than you, right? And she said, what? And I said, yeah, I always have to ask. I mean, I've done it all my life, and it is now, have you paid for your shopping? And I'm just like, of course. Do you see what I mean? Necessary, because I've even seen it when I'm, when they stop, they just do a random check and say, So these are things that white people may not even be aware happens, but this is my lived experience. So we wanted it to be super relatable, and then Fred did exactly the same in terms of the sort of family that he came from, and how these exclusionary circumstances, they shape your life, and what do you do when you're in them, right? So it starts off with a lot of storytelling, but then what it then does is that it says, okay, now that you can identify that, and also you as the reader can also think of many circumstances where you have felt excluded, what is it that we can do together? So there are, there's a lot of questioning and enabling, I suppose, the reader to become vulnerable and to say, okay, what change can I make? Because I think a lot of white audiences are either stuck where they are, or they're annoyed, or they are completely worn out when it comes to anything related to racism, inclusion, diversity, equity. There's a switch off button. And so what we're saying is, guys, don't switch off. Please don't switch off, at least put the switch back on, right? Are actually ways that we can show you in very, very simple ways that you can start with your family, can start with your organization, because these are now behavioral changes that have to occur, right? And so we give you a step-by-step guide that says, in 28 days, you can do something different every single day to move towards inclusion.
So super practical.
Super practical. Absolutely. And that's what we really loved about it. And then we just, we give many other examples. So if you're someone, who wants to start off on that, so we're giving journeys, inclusion journeys you can go on, right? Do you want to start with a 28-day practice? Do that. See how that goes, right? If it is that you want to go on a longer journey or a slightly different journey, then we give you something to go on there. So, because everyone is at a different place. Some people might be, oh, I've done this. Oh, I understand this. Oh, some people might be, I have no idea how to start. I don't know where to look. And then, we just give...
I think that's most of us. Most of us is like, we have no idea. So I'm sitting here going, how do I get on a journey program? I need one.
Exactly.
That's...
Exactly. Yeah, so that's really what it is. And I would say that, it's super exciting. So it's written, and, some people may not know that in the middle of writing of the book that unfortunately, Fred passed away. So we really want this book to be part of a legacy building book that will change the world, and that, everyone can talk about around, their dining room tables and when they're eating, and or their picnic tables or their boardroom tables, whatever the table is. Please start talking about it and implementing it. You can discuss this with your children. It shows way how to navigate when you have some members of your family who are on board. So you're a family. But, if you discuss this with other members of your family in another state or in another part of the country, they're like, oh, please, we're just not interested. We're not there,
Right.
So how do you navigate those things? So it's super practical. It's really exciting. The stories bring to life, what's happening all over the world. I would say it's the book that is global. It shows stories from many parts of the world. Yeah, it's really exciting, and it's about really building legacies and changing the world through character.
Well, Chitupa, you built us up. We're all excited. We're all on board. We want to get the book.
Right.
Where do things stand on the book's availability? And I mean, do you need any help there that you could put out to make people aware of how they could get involved, or be useful?
Yes, brilliant. So I think a few things. The one thing is that we are looking for what I would call impassioned publishers, who really want to also change the world, and, really want to see this inclusion space get much wider and bigger than the current exclusion space. So, yeah, really, we're looking for publishers who really get this. The second thing I would say in terms of practicality is what I would say is a call for action, and really I just want to leave 5 calls for action that all the listeners and, and anyone that they talk to could help us on this journey to get this out. And so really it's about, we say the first thing is to invite. And what we're saying in this is invite people who look different from you, who speak differently from you. Invite them, as I said, to your boardroom tables, to your meetings, to your picnic tables, to your networks, to your clubs, to your, if you're in a hobby group or whatever, invite people who are different from yourself. Just do it, right? The second thing is welcome them, right? Now, welcoming is not the same as inviting, right? You have to invite them, but when welcoming requires preparation, right? And welcoming is really putting yourself in the other person's shoes and thinking, where in my life have I entered where I felt really uncomfortable, or I felt really uneasy, I didn't feel welcomed? And so make the preparation so that you haven't only invited people, but that when they come, they are super welcome. They, you give them and you pour out your authenticity and the best of what you've got. You engage with them, right? And dare I say, you start from day one to show them what love looks like in the world. That's welcoming, right? The third thing is to actively engage and care about others, right? And this again is really about relationship building. Everything that you do with individuals who don't look the same as yourself, start building a relationship. There are so many commonalities between us in terms of, family and, as I said, what do you like doing and what are you passionate about and all this sort of stuff, right? And then when you see that you have things that are in common, I mean, with Fred, you like growing rhubarb. Well, I love making a rhubarb tart. I mean, people come to my house and that's the one thing that they know me for. It's known as a rhubarb crumble. But I was just like, wow, you grow rhubarb. And I love, about that. I mean, it sounds like something really small, but it's a starting point and you're both sort of passionate about it and you will find commonalities, but then it gives you the foundation to really talk about the differences and the difficulties and the challenges and the struggles. But it's building that trust so that you both feel safe to be able to explore these relationships. Then the fourth thing feeds into that, which is really to be open and to be vulnerable, right? So be open, be vulnerable, and be collaborative. We can all, we're all going to make some mistakes along this journey. Let me just say that, right? But being open allows us to be explorative and allows us to know that the common vision, the goal, is for all of us to move forward in our uniqueness, in our diversity, in our authenticity, and that each one of us has something profoundly unique and delicious to bring to the world, right? And the fifth thing really is about empowerment, right? And empowerment is about enabling individuals such as myself and people of different diversities to grow in significant ways. And how do we grow in significant ways? By ensuring that, again, this is all about integrity, ensuring that we are put in positions and in roles and given opportunities where we are allowed to make decisions, big decisions, right? And that through that process, we can both help each other. So decision-making processes, leadership processes, processes that enable us to be even greater role models, not only for Black people, but role models for everyone. So that's the call for action. Invite, welcome, care for others, collaborate, and empower.
I've got them written down.
Yeah, brilliant.
That is so incredible. I love it. It makes total sense. And
you can go
it's
onto
inviting.
you can also go onto the KRW International website, and you can have a look at that call for action as well. You can go onto my LinkedIn profile. You can just put in my name, Chitupa. I think I'm not, as of my last check, I think there's only one of me on there. But you'll see me anyway as executive development coach. It's also on there. So please connect. Please, let's talk. Let's have the dialogue. Let's begin together.
Chitupa, you can bring this power, like the power that we've all sat here and listened to and witnessed in you. I see that. I mean, it's such an opportunity to bring into organizations. I mean, your presence, your conviction, your intellect in its application, man, it's so powerful. Can people hire you as obviously to do this within their organization? And how do they go about doing that? Is LinkedIn the best way to connect?
LinkedIn is the best way, and yes, yeah, absolutely. The application within organizations is really what KRW and I would like to do together, and really create incredible shifts moving forward and build new legacies within organization. And it starts with leadership. So yes, it would be a privilege to hear from those organizations that are really cutting edge and that really want to do more, and recognize that, they may recognize that they've done X amount, and what we're saying is we're not negating the X amount. What we're saying is, let's look at the X amount, but now we're just bringing all the good stuff on top of that to realize, all that you have done thus far, and to ensure that the returns are for all of us.
Thank you so much for being on the Return on Character podcast. It was a true honor for me. I learned so much, but most of all, I'm inspired to do better. And I'm honestly just grateful to know you. You're gloriously beautiful, good, intellectually mighty hurricane in the world. And I hope that your impact continues. And if there's ever anything more I can do to help further it, I am here
Thank you so
to
much.
do so.
It's been a real privilege for me as well. Thank you, Dan. I am now a great follower of all that you do as well. And really thank you for impacting the world the way that you do. So I know that our paths this is just the beginning, right, of our paths meeting. So
I hope so.
Thank you. It's been a privilege.
For information about investing in character-led companies, please visit www.rocinvestments.com and join the growing number of investors choosing to make character a priority when investing their money.